Hello and welcome to Agricultural Policy, the podcast. My name is Hansjürg Jäger and I'm here today with Josh Baethge. Josh, hello.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Sunny day here, and I'm in Dallas, Texas, in the United States, and everything is going well today.
Very good. I'm in Switzerland, close to Bern, and it's the first time we have our show together. So what are we trying to do with this show?
I think this is a good opportunity for both of us to discuss, agriculture issues that affect both of our nations and discuss some of the similarities and the different ways our countries address a lot of the same issues. I find it fascinating to see how there's so many different ways to address the same thing. And I'm looking forward to learning more and sharing some of my experience here in the States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. I wrote in the preparation, well, we will shed light on the policy process in the US and in Switzerland, get an understanding of what is driving policy processes and policies in the end. And you said it very nicely. Well, there are some problems we are addressing, for instance, biodiversity loss or how to get people to a healthy and safe and affordable diet, how to make farmers' incomes better, for instance. So there are many challenges, I believe, that are similar in the US and in Switzerland, except for the structure.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I think that's always the challenge of how do you achieve sustainability and make people healthier, but at the same time allow farmers to do what they love to do and earn a living, and how do you find the right balance where both of those things can happen? I think almost all the issues we're going to talk about kind of come down to that fundamental challenge of making a living and doing what's best for people long term.
Well, and now making what's best for people long term. I mean, looking at the US from a European perspective is like Trump. Trump seems to be everywhere.
He is everywhere.
Similar over there?
It's absolutely, he dominates every conversation, whether you're in a meeting talking about policy with other politicians or just sitting at the dinner table with people. It's what everybody wants to know. It's such a change from our previous president, and everybody's kind of looking to see or trying to figure out what's going to happen next. The things we're hearing, the things you're hearing on TV and everywhere else. Is this truly what his policies are going to be, or is this posturing in an attempt to get to some other solution? And that's the big question.
Is it? I mean, I get the impression that there is kind of quite some frenzy about the processes and a lot of things in Indigo. I mean, 200 executive orders in the first night or so. So has Trump kept his pace?
It's what he said he was going to do, and coming in, he's brought a completely different philosophy to the presidency than anybody we've seen before. He's been on the scene now for more than 10 years, and I think during his first term he learned a lot from them. And he kind of surrounded. He was new to politics, and he surrounded himself with people with government experience, and a lot of times he listened to their expertise. And after he left office, a lot of those people went public, people that actually supported President Trump and worked for him, but didn't agree with all of his ideas. And they would go into detail about how they prevented it from doing things that they thought were going to be detrimental to the country. And he didn't like that. He's been public about that. He feels like he was undermined. So now he's coming in, and he's made a point that he doesn't plan to be stopped this time. He's surrounding himself by people who seemingly their number one qualification is loyalty and support for Trump's plan, no matter what it was. And that's completely different from most of the other presidents we've had in our history.
So, and how does Trump 2.0 affect your work now? I mean, do you have a real life impact of this new president, of this incoming president?
We will. It's right now we're trying to figure out what the impact will be. So, the way our government is set up, we have a Department of Agriculture. It handles a wide array of agriculture policy, everything from funding for nutrition to crop insurance to disaster support technical initiatives, education things. It's a massive government agency, and the president has the power to choose the person that runs it, the Secretary of Agriculture, and then as well as the lower level undersecretaries, and then that group will determine. Will decide if they want to keep the rest of the USDA staff or bring in new people. And, with new people coming in, now we're waiting to see what will these different philosophies mean in terms of policies. A lot of the things you'll hear right now, tariffs. President Trump has been very vocal about wanting to impose tariffs on our biggest agriculture trading partners, China, Canada, Mexico. I mean, I believe that represents, close to 2/3, I want to say, of our agricultural trade.
But talking about agricultural trade, I mean, the U.S. is one of the biggest exporters of pork to China, right?
That is correct. Yes, and we have a huge. There are, depending on the month you look, they're number 1, 2, or 3, Canada, Mexico, and China in terms of our trading partner. And we know that if tariffs are imposed, there's going to be retaliatory tariffs against U.S. goods. That's going to decrease our exports and increase input costs for farmers and for everyday citizens as well. President Trump says that he will be able to offset the effects of that during his first administration when he did impose some tariffs on China. He gave payments to farmers, emergency payments to farmers. What he's proposing this time is a much bigger tariff package, and it's unclear how he'll be able to offset those effects. And I think that's the big question people in agriculture want to know is how, because any economist will tell you this is going to raise prices, this is going to hurt exports. I mean, which is kind of ironic because that's what he ran on. The inflation. He claimed he was going to bring inflation down, and ask any economist, these policies will drive inflation up. So how is he going to counteract that? He says he has a plan. Everyone's waiting to see what that plan is right now, and that's kind of the big unknown at this point.
And what is the expectations of the farmers? I mean, you are covering or you're writing for farmers, rural areas in the U.S., so I believe in the center of the U.S. mostly. So how do they see this change in policy?
That's the interesting dynamic right now, because when you look at who voted for President Trump and who voted for President Biden, rural America overwhelmingly supports President Trump, and there's a host of cultural issues that they tend to side with outside of agriculture policy. And one of the things that you look at the polling, like tariffs, for example, President Trump says he wants to get tough on China, the perceived threat of China against the United States. And that position in general is something that his supporters very much agree with. But the problem is, that these policies are going to hit them in the pocketbook. But they, for now, have faith in President Trump that he will come up with plans that will offset this. It's just, it's hard to see what that is without him providing details. And I think most economists would tell you he's not going to be able to offset that. The President Trump has used tariffs as a tool he believes will create more jobs in the United States because it'll spur, domestic production. But even, a lot of the stats you show, even if he's able to do that, it may not offset just all of, the value we have in trade without these barriers. So that's, again, I know it's like I'm repeating myself, but that's the question. He says he has a plan. We don't know what the plan is specifically yet.
And I mean, you just described before that there are like the administration's heads, like the head of the USDA and the lower level, they're now getting to the approval of the Senate, I believe.
That's correct. So the way that the American system works is the president gets to choose a nominee, and then they go before the U.S. Senate, which is 100 members, and it takes a simple majority for the nominee to be approved. And in the last election, Donald Trump was a Republican, Joe Biden was a Democrat. In the last, before this year, Democrats had a slight majority in the Senate. And this time, the Republicans have I want to say 4-seat majority in the Senate, and the vice president gets to break a tie if it's a 50-50 vote. So President Trump does have the advantage of it's his own party approving his nominee. So it makes it a lot more likely that he'll be able to get all of his nominees through.
And how long does it take? I mean, if President Trump has a plan, I believe someone in the administration has to be around, at least to accept it, or maybe as well to write it. So it will take some time to develop. So how long does it take from like taking office until you have the whole machine up and running with the new stuff?
It just depends on. It depends on a lot of factors. Like for the nominees, he's really pushed the Senate to confirm them as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But the process involves, that they have a hearing before a smaller committee where they ask questions. That committee makes a recommendation to approve or not to approve. If the person makes it through the committee hearing, then there's a hearing before the full Senate. But you're talking about 20, 30 something nominees for various positions at least. My number may be a little bit off on that, but so it's a matter of scheduling these things in, scheduling the hearings, scheduling the votes, getting them through, and then once those people are installed, then they need to go in and get acquainted with the job. So I think you mentioned, earlier this week, President Trump issued an executive order to freeze previous government spending that was authorized by the previous president, and that was probably something that was done too fast because the court shot it down really quick. There was a lot of confusion over what exactly that affects, and then they withdrew that a couple of days later. So I think that was something where the president wanted to get something through fast, and they didn't quite get it out right, and now they're going to have to go back and see how to do it so that there's not confusion or stopping funding for programs that he doesn't want to end. So he's obviously trying to get things passed, but as quickly as possible. But some things are just going to take a little more time depending on the details.
Yeah. So this means another 2 to 6 months of more or less turbulent times.
I would say that's fair. I would say within 6 months, he should have his people in place. They're going to be staffed up. They're going to be ready to go. But again, there's other issues. We have, we have we haven't passed the official budget for this year. A government for funding for fiscal year 2025. So that's we extended it. We're going to have to address that. And by March, I believe, is the deadline. So there's these other deadlines. There's always something. So it just depends on what's the priority. But he's definitely trying to move as fast as possible. And you have Democrats trying to slow the process down, but without a majority in Congress right now, they're limited in what they can do. But it's just politics of it. It's politics every day, and everybody trying to get an angle and position themselves as best they can. And I think that's another one of the unknowns, is just how fast will President Trump be able to enact these things, and then how effective will they be? Is he going to have to go back and fix things? Unintended consequences. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on in a short amount of time.
And how did it? I mean, this is my last question, and we just talked about the federal level, but there are all the states, right? They do have their own ag policy processes. And how is this power balance now? Is it shifting towards to Washington, or is it rather going more in decentralized future?
Generally speaking, Republicans typically favor more control to the states. So then that's one of the things that they're historically, Republicans want to have a small federal government, lots of local control, and then that's been the typical Republican philosophy versus Democrats, which typically prefer a more prominent role for the federal government. But there's exceptions to this with President Trump, because there are certain issues, not necessarily related to agriculture, but for other things where he does not want to leave it to the states. In states where he doesn't, where they have more Democrat leading governments, he's looking to impose policies where he can, and a lot more of that is on the social side. So with President Trump, it's not as much of a philosophical argument. It's oftentimes any way he can get through what he wants, he's going to take the position that'll get to the end goal that he wants, regardless of ideology or traditional politics.
So it's rather the right of the strongest, or like a power game.
In many ways it is, and then I don't think he makes any secret of it. It's kind of a whatever it takes mentality, means justify the ends. That's one thing we've learned about President Trump for the last, like I said, what has it been, 10 years now, that he's not concerned about the normal process of things. He looks for ways to get around the traditional agreements and find, okay, is this a legal agreement, or is this just the way things have been done before? And if he can find a way around it, sometimes, even crossing the law according to the courts, but he's not afraid to do that. And I think the reason for that is because, what we've seen is his supporters support that. I think in the past, people were perceived to be doing some of the things he did that goes against tradition, that goes against the traditional norms of the country, there'd be a lot more pushback. But in the climate today, his supporters fully support him doing whatever it takes to get his agenda across. And, he has a majority. It's a small majority, but right now it's a governing majority.
Yeah, I see. That's interesting. I mean, if you look at Switzerland and how transition is happening here, it's a very smooth, well, one could say even boring process.
I remember those days here, yeah, but it's it's not like that. But yeah, but I heard there is some changes there. I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. I mean, we do have, instead of a president, we do have 7 federal councillors, like 7 people governing our country, and usually they serve for some years, some a bit longer, some a bit shorter. And we had in the beginning of the year, rather surprisingly, one federal councillor, Viola Amherd, who decided to leave her office by the end of March. So there are 7 people governing Switzerland, and one of them said, I'm done. It has been interesting, fun, challenging, an honor, but it has been that for me. Like, this is more or less what she said in her retirement speech. And then what is happening afterwards? Like, the federal councillors are elected by parliament.
Okay.
So we do elect them, and they then choose who is like running the country. And this has some advantages. One is like stability. I mean, now Viola Amherd is leaving office. Now there are 2 more things to know. First, the parties. We do have several parties, and some of them do have also like the federal councillors. There is the Swiss People's Party on the right side. There are some in the center, 1. Then there are liberals, 2. And on the left side, the socialists with 2. So this makes 6. And then in the center, this was the person who left. Viola Amherd is for the center in the Federal Council. So it is the center, the party, the center, or who has the custody right. Like, it's not written in law, but it's like a convention. So in the center party, there is now the discussion going on who is going to follow for Viola Amherd. So who is now her successor? And then what do media do? I mean, they speculate. We know this game, and we did it, I believe, sometimes ourselves. And
never do that.
Never, no, really. and they bring up names, like long lists of names. And what was interesting, what happened was a lot of very good candidates said no. So there was the president of the center who just announced a few days before Viola Amherd left off, handed in her resignation. He said he wants to step down as president. I mean, the media coverage afterwards was clear. Well, he wants to get rid of his presidency, or he will end his presidency to then be the successor for Viola Amherd. So it was then kind of clear he might be following her as federal council.
Right.
Then the media broke that he won't. He said, well, I'm likely not a very happy federal council. Then there was the leader of the fraction in the parliament who said, no, I don't want, because family and other jobs and responsibilities. Then there were other very good candidates, and they all said no. No time, no inner fire, won't cut it.
So why do you think that was? Is that just now talking about speculation, just because they weren't? Was it a personal thing, or more is the challenges of the job? You think nobody wants it right now?
Well, it depends a bit. I mean, now just to finish, what happened to the speculation game? There is right now one candidate for sure, and the candidate is Markus Ritter. He's for now the president of the Swiss Farmers Union. So, and to be said to be the most effective and the most powerful politician in Bern. So he's a very strategic mind and a very good in creating alliances to find the majority for his ideas. And he's now officially running for federal council.
Oh, okay.
And the question, you asked the question, why is it so hard to find someone? There are, I think, well, maybe 3 factors. One, we have 7 people running the country, while other countries have like 20 ministers. So it's quite a workload. So people talk about 70 to 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you trade in your personal life, your previous career, everything you had for a full-time job someone has to do, but no one is thankful for. And you are just fixing shit you didn't know that exists that needs to be fixed. Right. So it's like being in a big washing machine and trying to figure out how to put the things together.
Sure.
And I mean, that's one part, that's the structural thing. The other thing is it's most likely that the new Federal Council will lead the Department of Security and Sports and like the military, so the army. And the department has some problems with financing of projects, and they have some projects very, very much behind deadline. So it seems to be rather challenging there to create some order again, or some working order, which might also explain why it's not so popular to run now.
Yeah. What about if I guess real quick, I'm curious, like how big of a role do regional differences play? Like, with our Congress, you have, set areas get, represented. Is that the same for the Parliament? Is there a geographical breakdown and some disconnect between the areas?
Yes. Well, there is for the Federal Council, there are some rules, like they try to have a good mix of men and women from the German and French speaking or Italian speaking part of Switzerland as well, so that there is whole Switzerland is somehow represented in the Federal Council. Mm-hmm. That's one on top level. Then the Parliament, we have two chambers. The National Council, which is based on population density of each canton. So the canton of Zurich has the most. Then there are the cantons like Appenzell, who have not so many inhabitants, so they don't have many national councillors. And then there is the Council of States. For our cantons, every canton has the right to send 2 people, except half cantons, they have just 1. And so there are the big national council with 200 members, and the States Council with 46 members, who do kind of represent the people and the cantons. The small chamber has its goal is to prevent the very densely populated cantons to take over control. So it's like a balancing of having people, having cantons, and then have a system that represents the people in Switzerland. The interesting thing is the system is already 160 years old. It founded in 1848 and developed ever since. 200 members since 150 years. Mm-hmm. Just still the same kind of basic rules.
Kind of withstood the test of time, if you will, right there.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Because I think that's always the challenge when you talk about these, federal systems is how do you make sure that every area is represented, but not overrepresented? How do you represent rural interests but
Hmm.
and the urban interests, and it's a very delicate balancing act, I think, but it has major implications on policies in both countries from what I
Yeah,
gather.
yeah, yeah. And I think in Switzerland there is one thing which is rather special. And I mean, we talk sometimes about this gap between rural and urban people.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I believe the now vice president wrote Hilibili LGB
Yeah,
about like these differences in how the world
he
um,
he did.
is.
And the interesting thing about that book, and as at the time when this came out, right around the beginning of Trump's first term, he was
Mm-hmm.
very, very much against President Trump, and he
Mm-hmm.
compared him to, I don't know if you're familiar, he compared him to heroin, and
Mm-hmm.
then he said when he ran for Senate and realized he could win with Trump's endorsement, all of a sudden he said he changed his mind. It's interesting. Sorry to go down that sidetrack there.
Yeah. So no, but it shows us there is this idea that people in the rural areas they see the world differently than people in the urban areas.
Hmm.
And in Switzerland, I mean, Switzerland is a rather small country,
Hmm.
40,000 square kilometers, 8-9 million people living here. Most of the people living here, they do have um, in their family's history somewhere relatives farming.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes as well, like, well, they lived in the rural side and then in the urban areas as well. So in the end, and there is just recently there is has been a study been published which showed that the people in urban and rural areas they do not differ in the prioritization of agricultural policy goals.
Oh, that's interesting.
So despite having this idea that people have to have different worlds, different perspectives, if it comes down to the like what farmers or what ag policy should address, there is no difference between the people and in rural and urban areas. And this is interesting, and it shows as well how small Switzerland is in a way, and how well connected the whole country is.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating because I don't necessarily see the same thing here in the States. I think we often have a disconnect with because I think it has a lot to do with the geographic space difference because
Mm-hmm.
people that live in the middle of the big cities versus people that live 100 miles from a city, 200 miles from a city, they have very, very different lives. They're not as interconnected, and they tend to generally speaking prioritize what they think are their own priorities. And from what you're saying, it sounds like there's a greater appreciation for the interconnected nature, and interdependency between rural and urban interests.
Well, and maybe in the end, the differences aren't that big as we think in the first place. I mean, everybody wants to have safe and good food at an affordable price, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, I mean, looking at the clock right now, we said in the beginning we want to go for about 20 minutes. We're now for 30 minutes already discussing.
Oh man, I didn't even realize that.
So
I'm enjoying learning about this. Yes, this has been a
no,
lot of
but
fun.
yeah, it's very good. It's very good, and I mean, it's the first show now we are recording, but we are going to talk about the development of agriculture policy in general, like what are driving factors. We want to cover incentive programs because we do have some, you have some. We are also going deeper into the question, how do people shape agricultural policy? Because we do have some options for popular votes, for instance. And if we find some time, we are also diving into health and nutrition.
Yeah, that's the plan. Like I said, I'm looking. I think we're both looking forward to talking about these issues and things that are important to people in both of our countries. And
Mhm.
yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. I think we have a lot to talk
Mhm.
about and a lot of ground to cover.
Very good, very good. So we will see each other again, I guess.
We will. If you'll have me again, I would.
Yes, of
I'm looking
course.
forward to it. No, yeah, definitely. We're excited to do this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to our next discussion.
Cool. Thank you, Josh. And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Josh, thank you very much. It has been my pleasure.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. I enjoyed it, and like I said, I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Cool. So make sure you follow us on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and whatever channel you find us, and to subscribe to our show. That was Agricultural Policy, the podcast. This was it from us for now. Have a good day.